The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as young Prince William sat at his desk, carefully writing thank you letters to well-wishers from around the world. At just 8 years old, he had already learned the importance of gratitude, but today felt different. Today, his mother, Princess Diana, had promised him something special that would change how he saw the world forever. Diana entered the room with her characteristic warm smile, dressed casually in jeans and a simple sweater. She believed in showing her sons that royalty didn't mean being distant from real people and their struggles. William looked up from his letter writing, his blue eyes sparkling with curiosity about their planned adventure. "Are you ready for our special trip today, William?" Diana asked, sitting on the edge of his desk. William nodded eagerly, though he still didn't know exactly where they were going. His mother had only told him they would visit some very special people who needed to know that others cared about them. The drive through London took them to a part of the city William had never seen before. The buildings looked different here, and as their car pulled up to a modest building with a simple sign reading "The Passage," William felt both nervous and excited. Diana had explained during the drive that they were visiting a homeless shelter, a place where people without homes could find food, warmth, and kindness. As they walked through the front door, William was immediately struck by the warm atmosphere inside. Despite the simple surroundings, there was something welcoming about the place. The staff greeted Diana like an old friend, and William realized his mother had been coming here regularly, without any cameras or publicity. Diana introduced William to the volunteers and explained that today they would help serve lunch to the guests. William felt a flutter of nervousness. He had never done anything like this before, and he wasn't sure what to expect. But his mother's gentle encouragement gave him confidence as she handed him an apron that was far too big for his small frame. The kitchen was busy with volunteers preparing sandwiches, soup, and hot tea. Diana showed William how to butter bread properly and arrange the sandwiches on plates. At first, his movements were careful and uncertain, but as he got into the rhythm of the work, William began to enjoy himself. There was something satisfying about creating something that would bring comfort to someone else. When it was time to serve the food, William followed his mother into the dining area. The room was filled with people of all ages, each with their own story of how they had come to need this place of refuge. Some were elderly, others were young families, and many were somewhere in between. What struck William most was how ordinary they seemed. These weren't the frightening strangers he might have imagined, but regular people who had simply fallen on hard times. Diana moved through the room with natural ease, stopping to chat with each person as she served their meal. She remembered names, asked about health concerns, and listened to their stories with genuine interest. William watched in amazement as his mother's presence seemed to brighten the entire room. He had seen her at royal functions before, but this was different. Here, she wasn't performing a duty. She was simply being herself. When it was William's turn to serve, his hands shook slightly as he approached the first table. An elderly man with kind eyes smiled up at him and said, "Thank you, young man. That looks delicious." The simple gratitude in the man's voice touched something deep in William's heart. This person was thanking him not because he was a prince, but because he was offering something needed and valuable. As the afternoon continued, William found himself drawn into conversations with the guests. A young mother told him about her children and how grateful she was for the safe place to bring them. An older woman shared stories about her life before she lost her home, speaking of dreams and disappointments with equal measure. Each interaction opened William's eyes a little wider to the reality that people could face circumstances completely beyond their control. One moment stood out above all others. A man roughly his father's age sat alone at a corner table, looking sad and withdrawn. Diana noticed him and gently encouraged William to take him a cup of tea. As William approached, the man looked up with surprise and gratitude. They began talking, and William learned that the man had once been a teacher but had lost his job and then his home due to circumstances that seemed almost impossible to believe. What amazed William was how intelligent and articulate this man was. He spoke about books, asked William about his studies, and even helped him with a math problem he had been struggling with. In that moment, William realized that homelessness could happen to anyone, and that a person's current circumstances didn't define their worth or capabilities. As they prepared to leave, William felt changed in a way he couldn't quite put into words. The experience had been eye-opening, but more than that, it had been deeply fulfilling. He had discovered that helping others brought a joy unlike anything he had experienced before. The gratitude of the people they had served was genuine and heartfelt, but what surprised him most was how much he had gained from giving. Diana noticed the thoughtful expression on her son's face as they walked back to their car. She had hoped this experience would teach him important lessons about compassion and service, but she could see it had affected him even more deeply than she had expected. William was quiet during the drive home, processing all he had seen and learned. That evening, as William sat down to write in his diary, a habit Diana had encouraged to help him process his experiences, he found himself struggling to capture the day in words. How could he describe the feeling of making someone smile simply by offering them kindness? How could he explain the lesson that serving others actually enriched his own life? He wrote about the individuals he had met, tried to remember each name and story. He wrote about how different the reality of homelessness was from what he had imagined. Most importantly, he wrote about the realization that his privileged position came with opportunities to make a real difference in people's lives. From that day forward, William's understanding of his role as a future king began to shift. He had always known he would have duties and responsibilities, but now he understood that the greatest privilege of his position was the ability to bring attention and resources to those who needed help. The visit to the passage had planted a seed that would grow throughout his life, shaping his approach to royal duty and his commitment to charitable work. Diana smiled as she tucked William into bed that night, knowing that her son had taken his first real step toward understanding what it meant to serve others with genuine compassion. The day had been delightful, not just because they had helped people in need, but because William had discovered something precious about himself and his capacity for empathy. Years later, William would often reflect on this first visit to the passage as one of the most important days of his childhood. It was the day he learned that true joy comes not from what you receive, but from what you give to others. It was a lesson that would guide him throughout his life, influencing every aspect of his royal duties and personal relationships. The crisp autumn air filled the grounds of Eton College as 18-year-old Prince William nervously adjusted his school uniform for the last time. Today marked the end of his formal education before heading to university, but more importantly, it was the day he would receive news that would shape the next chapter of his life. The letter he held in his hands bore the seal of the University of St. Andrews, and his future hung in the balance of whatever words lay inside. William had always been a dedicated student, but university represented something more than academic achievement. It offered the possibility of a relatively normal life, away from the constant scrutiny that had followed him since childhood. After his mother's death when he was 15, the need for some semblance of normalcy had become even more important to him. The decision to apply to St. Andrews had not been made lightly. The Scottish University was known for its excellent academic reputation, but what appealed to William most was its location. Scotland offered a chance to experience student life without the overwhelming media attention that would follow him to universities closer to London. He had visited the campus during his gap year and fallen in love with the ancient buildings, the coastal location, and the genuine warmth of the people he had met there. Standing in his dormitory room, surrounded by the belongings he had accumulated over his years at Eton, William carefully opened the envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the letter, and his heart raced as he read the words that would change everything. He had been accepted to study art history at the University of St. Andrews. The joy he felt was immediate and overwhelming. This wasn't just acceptance to a university, it was acceptance into a world where he could be, for the first time in his life, just another student. The thought of walking across campus, attending lectures, and making friends without the constant awareness of his royal status filled him with excitement and hope. William immediately called his father, Prince Charles, to share the news. Charles's pride was evident in his voice as he congratulated his son on this achievement. They discussed the practical arrangements that would need to be made, including security considerations and media agreements. The palace had already negotiated with the press for William to be left alone during his university years, allowing him to focus on his studies and personal development. The weeks leading up to his departure for St. Andrews were filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. William had experienced many firsts in his life, but this felt different. This was his first real step toward independence, his first chance to create an identity beyond his royal title. He spent time reading about the university's history, learning about the courses he would take, and imagining what his life might be like as a regular student. His grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, offered him some valuable advice during one of their private conversations at Windsor Castle. She spoke about her own experiences of duty and service, but also emphasized the importance of understanding the world beyond palace walls. She reminded him that the best leaders are those who truly understand the people they serve, and university would give him that opportunity. The day of departure arrived with typical British weather, gray skies, and a light drizzle that seemed to match William's mixed emotions. As he loaded his belongings into the car for the journey to Scotland, he felt a profound sense of anticipation. His father and stepmother Camilla were there to see him off, offering final words of encouragement and support. The drive to St. Andrews took several hours, giving William time to process the magnitude of this transition. As they crossed the border into Scotland, he felt as though he was crossing a threshold into a new phase of his life. The landscape gradually changed from the familiar English countryside to the more rugged Scottish terrain, and with each mile, his excitement grew. Arriving at St. Andrews was like stepping into a different world. The ancient university town, with its medieval streets and historic buildings, had an atmosphere unlike anywhere William had ever lived. The North Sea coastline provided a dramatic backdrop, and the crisp Scottish air seemed to carry possibilities and adventures yet to be discovered. His accommodation was in St. Salvator's Hall, a traditional residence hall that housed students from all backgrounds and nationalities. William had specifically requested to live in halls rather than private accommodation, wanting to experience the full university lifestyle. His room was modest but comfortable, with a view over the town that reminded him daily of how different this life would be from his royal upbringing. The first few days were a whirlwind of orientation activities, meeting fellow students, and beginning to navigate the academic and social aspects of university life. William was struck by how welcoming everyone was, and how quickly he began to feel like just another first-year student finding his way. His fellow students were aware of who he was, but they seemed determined to treat him normally, which was exactly what he had hoped for. His first art history lecture was a moment he would never forget. Sitting in a large lecture hall, surrounded by other students, taking notes, and engaging with ideas purely for the love of learning, William felt a freedom he had never experienced before. The professor discussed Renaissance art with passion and expertise, and William found himself completely absorbed in the subject matter, forgetting entirely about his royal identity. Making friends proved easier than he had anticipated. His natural warmth and genuine interest in others drew people to him, and soon he had a close group of friends who appreciated him for his personality rather than his title. They shared meals in the dining hall, studied together in the library, and explored the charming town of St. Andrews on weekends. One particularly memorable evening, William and his new friends decided to explore the town's traditional pubs. It was his first real taste of ordinary student social life, and he reveled in the simple pleasure of sitting in a cozy pub, having conversations about everything from academic subjects to silly jokes, without any protocol or formality. The other students occasionally forgot who he was entirely, addressing him simply as Will, and including him in their plans without any special consideration. The academic work proved challenging and engaging in ways that surprised him. Art history opened his eyes to different cultures, historical periods, and ways of understanding human creativity and expression. He found himself staying up late to finish essays, not because he had to, but because he was genuinely passionate about the subjects he was studying. This was learning for its own sake, rather than as preparation for royal duties. Weekend trips around Scotland became a regular part of his university experience. With his friends, William explored ancient castles, hiked through the Highlands, and experienced the rich culture and history of Scotland in a way that felt authentic and personal. These adventures gave him a deeper appreciation for the country and its people, knowledge that would serve him well in his future role. One of the most delightful aspects of university life was the simple pleasure of anonymity. William could walk across campus, sit in lectures, or grab coffee without the constant awareness of being watched or judged. For the first time since childhood, he could make mistakes, learn from them, and grow as a person without every misstep being analyzed by the media or the public. The friendships he formed during this time became some of the most important relationships of his life. These are people who knew him before he fully grew into his royal role, who remembered him as a young man figuring out his place in the world. They provided him with a connection to normal life that would remain precious to him throughout his future royal duties. As his first term progressed, William realized that this experience was giving him something invaluable, a true understanding of what life was like for people his age across the country. He was learning not just from textbooks and lectures, but from living alongside peers from diverse backgrounds and experiencing the challenges and joys of independent young adult life. The delightful discovery was that being treated as an ordinary person didn't diminish his sense of purpose or responsibility. Instead, it enriched his understanding of the people he would one day serve. Every conversation with fellow students, every shared experience of academic pressure or social excitement, every moment of ordinary university life was teaching him lessons that no royal training could provide. Years later, William would often speak about his time at St. Andrews as formative in ways that went far beyond academic learning. It was there that he discovered he could be both a prince and a normal young man, that duty and personal fulfillment could coexist, and that the best preparation for leadership was understanding and sharing the experiences of those he would lead. The helicopter blades whirred overhead as Prince William completed another successful search and rescue mission with the RAF Valley Squadron in Anglesey, Wales. At 28 years old, he had found his calling as a search and rescue pilot, a role that allowed him to serve his country in a direct, meaningful way while developing skills that had nothing to do with his royal birth. But today would bring a different kind of mission, one that would test not just his flying abilities, but his capacity for hope and human connection. The call came in during the early hours of a gray November morning. A small fishing vessel had sent out a distress signal in the treacherous waters off the Welsh coast. The storm that had been building overnight had intensified, creating dangerous conditions with towering waves and fierce winds. For the crew aboard the struggling boat, time was running out, and for William, this represented exactly why he had chosen this demanding but rewarding career. William had joined the RAF search and rescue force not for publicity or to fulfill royal duties, but because he genuinely wanted to make a difference in people's lives. The training had been rigorous and demanding, requiring him to prove himself based solely on his abilities as a pilot and rescue operator. His fellow crew members treated him as an equal, judging him by his skills and dedication rather than his title, which was exactly what he had hoped for. As the rescue helicopter lifted off from RAF Valley, William felt the familiar surge of adrenaline mixed with focused determination. Flying in these conditions required complete concentration and trust in his training and equipment. The weather was deteriorating rapidly, with visibility dropping and winds that challenged even experienced pilots. But somewhere out there, people were depending on them, and that knowledge drove him forward. The fishing boat, named Celtic Pride, had been caught in the storm while returning from a routine fishing trip. The vessel carried a crew of 4 local fishermen who knew these waters well, but Even experienced sailors could find themselves overwhelmed by the power of nature. Radio communication with the boat was intermittent, adding to the urgency of the situation and the challenges facing the rescue team. As they flew toward the last known position of the vessel, William scanned the churning gray waters below, searching for any sign of the boat. His training had taught him to read the ocean, to spot the subtle signs that might indicate a vessel in distress. The waves were massive, some reaching 20 feet or more, and the thought of anyone surviving in such conditions was daunting. Through the headset, William heard the voice of one of the fishermen, crackling with static but filled with desperate hope. The man explained that their engine had failed, and they were taking on water despite their best efforts to pump it out. The boat was being pushed toward dangerous rocks along the coastline, and they had perhaps an hour before the situation became critical. Working with his crew, William coordinated the search pattern, using both visual scanning and electronic equipment to locate the vessel. The teamwork required in these situations was something he had grown to appreciate deeply. Every person on the helicopter had a crucial role to play, and success depended on their ability to work together seamlessly under extreme pressure. Finally, through the storm and spray, William spotted the small fishing boat being tossed like a toy into massive waves. The vessel was listing badly to one side, and it was clear that the crew's situation was becoming desperate. The proximity to the rocky coastline made the rescue even more challenging, as the helicopter had to maintain position in dangerous winds while avoiding the cliffs. The rescue operation required precise coordination between William as pilot and the winchman who would be lowered down to the boat. Communication was crucial, as the helicopter had to maintain the perfect position despite the buffeting winds and the movement of the vessel below. William's training and natural flying ability were put to the ultimate test as he fought to keep the aircraft steady. One by one, the fishermen were winched up to safety. William watched each rescue with intense focus, knowing that any mistake could be fatal. The first man brought up was the boat's captain, an experienced fisherman in his 50s who had spent his entire life working these waters. Despite his ordeal, the man's first words were of gratitude and concern for his remaining crew members. The second rescue was more challenging, as the youngest crew member had been injured when the boat lurched violently in the waves. The winchman had to provide medical assistance while securing the man for the dangerous journey up to the helicopter. William maintained perfect hover control, fighting against gusts that threatened to push the aircraft dangerously close to the cliffs. As the third fisherman was brought aboard, William could see that the boat was beginning to break apart under the relentless pounding of the waves. Time was running out for the final crew member, and the weather conditions were continuing to deteriorate. The rescue required split-second timing and absolute precision in flying technique. The final rescue was the most dramatic. As the winchman descended for the last time, a particularly large wave swept over the fishing boat, completely submerging it for several terrifying seconds. When it surfaced again, the vessel was clearly sinking, and the remaining crew member was barely holding on. William had to bring the helicopter even closer to the boat, risking collision with debris and fighting against increasingly violent wind shears. With skill that came from months of intensive training and natural flying ability, William managed to maintain position while the winchman secured the final fisherman and brought him to safety. As the last man was pulled aboard the helicopter, the fishing boat finally succumbed to the storm, disappearing beneath the waves that had been trying to claim it for hours. The flight back to base was filled with a mixture of exhaustion and elation. All four fishermen had been rescued successfully, and, while some required medical attention, all would survive their ordeal. For William, this mission represented everything he loved about his role as a search and rescue pilot. He had used his skills and training to save lives, working as part of a team where his contribution was measured by results rather than royal status. During the debriefing that followed, William learned more about the men they had rescued. The crew of the Celtic Pride were all local fishermen from the area around Anglesey, men with families who depended on the sea for their livelihood. They were hardworking, honest people who faced dangerous conditions regularly to provide for their families and supply fresh fish to their community. What moved William most was the gratitude expressed by the fishermen and their families. These weren't people impressed by royal titles or ceremonies. They were grateful for the skill and courage that had saved their loved ones' lives. The thanks they offered was genuine and heartfelt, based on actions rather than status, and it meant more to William than any formal recognition he had ever received. In the weeks following the rescue, William received letters from the families of the fishermen, sharing their appreciation and telling him about the impact his actions had on their lives. One letter from the wife of the boat's captain particularly touched him. She wrote about how her husband had spoken of William's skill and professionalism, noting that throughout the rescue, he had been treated not as a prince, but as a highly competent pilot who had risked his own safety to save others. The rescue operation became a defining moment in William's understanding of service and duty. Here was a form of royal service that was immediate, practical, and literally life-saving. Unlike ceremonial duties or charitable appearances, this work provided direct, tangible benefits to real people in their moments of greatest need. It was service in its purest form. The experience also reinforced William's belief in the importance of preparation and competence. The successful rescue had been possible because of rigorous training, advanced equipment, and the dedication of skilled professionals. It demonstrated that good intentions, while important, were meaningless without the ability to act effectively when action was needed most. The mission with the Celtic Pride became one of many successful rescues during William's time with the search and rescue force, but it remained particularly special because it perfectly exemplified what he found most rewarding about the role. It was a reminder that some of the most important work happens away from cameras and public attention, in moments when skill, courage, and dedication matter more than any title or ceremony. For the 4 fishermen whose lives were saved that day, Prince William would always be remembered not as a member of the royal family, but as the skilled pilot whose expertise and bravery brought them home safely to their families. For William, this was perhaps the greatest compliment he could receive and a powerful reminder of the difference one person can make when they use their abilities in service of others. Years later, whenever William spoke about his time as a search and rescue pilot, he would often reference missions like the Celtic Pride rescue. They represented some of the most fulfilling work of his life, moments when his training and dedication translated directly into saving lives and serving his people in the most fundamental way possible. The soft morning light filtered through the windows of the private wing at St. Mary's Hospital in London as Prince William held his newborn son for the first time. At 31 years old, he had experienced many significant moments in his life, but nothing had prepared him for the overwhelming surge of love, protectiveness, and joy that filled his heart as he gazed down at Prince George Alexander Louis. This tiny person, weighing just 8 pounds and 6 ounces, had already changed everything. Catherine, exhausted but radiant after a long labor, watched her husband's face transform as he cradled their son. William's usual composed royal demeanor had given way to something much more fundamental, the wonder and vulnerability of new fatherhood. His hands, steady enough to pilot rescue helicopters through dangerous storms, trembled slightly as he supported the baby's delicate head. The pregnancy had been a journey of anticipation and preparation that brought William and Catherine even closer together. From the moment they announced they were expecting their first child, William had thrown himself into learning about fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything important in his life. He read books, attended prenatal classes with Catherine, and spoke with other fathers about their experiences. But all the preparation in the world couldn't fully capture the reality of this moment. As William looked at his son's perfect features, the tiny fingers that gripped his own with surprising strength, the peaceful expression on the baby's face, the soft wisps of hair that caught the morning light, he felt a profound shift in his understanding of love and responsibility. The birth had taken place in the same hospital where William himself had been born, and where his mother, Princess Diana, had brought him to visit as a child. The continuity of generations was not lost on him as he held his son in the same place where he had taken his first breaths. Yet this moment felt entirely unique, a beginning rather than a continuation of something old. Catherine had been incredible throughout the labor, showing the strength and grace that at first attracted William to her during their university days. He had stayed by her side throughout, offering encouragement and support, but knowing that she was doing the hardest work. Watching her become a mother had filled him with even greater admiration for the woman he had married. The medical staff at St. Mary's had been wonderful, treating them with professional care while respecting the significance of this royal birth. But for William, the royal aspect of the situation felt secondary to the purely personal joy of becoming a father. This wasn't about continuing a dynasty or producing an heir. This was about welcoming a beloved child into a family. As the hours passed, and they began to settle into their first day as a family of 3, William marveled at how natural Catherine looked holding their son. She seemed to instinctively know how to comfort him, how to position him for feeding, how to interpret his different cries. William watched and learned, eager to be as involved and capable a father as possible. The baby's arrival had been much anticipated by the public, with media camping outside the hospital and crowds gathering to await news. But inside the private room, the world felt wonderfully small and focused. William found himself studying every detail of his son's appearance, memorizing the sound of his breathing, the way his tiny hand curled around a finger. Phone calls to family members were filled with excitement and joy. Prince Charles was overwhelmed with happiness at becoming a grandfather, his voice thick with emotion as William described his new grandson. Queen Elizabeth II, now a great-grandmother, expressed her delight and looked forward to meeting the newest member of the family. Each conversation reinforced the special nature of this moment. William's thoughts turned often to his own father and to his mother, who was not there to meet her first grandchild. He knew Diana would have been overjoyed by this moment, and he felt her presence in his determination to be the kind of hands-on, emotionally present father she would have wanted him to be. The lessons she had taught him about love, compassion, and the importance of family felt more relevant than ever. The practical aspects of new parenthood provided both challenges and unexpected pleasures. William quickly learned the art of changing diapers, something that amused the hospital staff who were accustomed to his formal royal appearances. He approached each task with good humor and determination, wanting to be a full partner in caring for their son. Sleep became a precious commodity as baby George established his own schedule of feeding and sleeping that bore no relation to adult preferences. William and Catherine took turns getting up for nighttime feedings, sharing the exhaustion and the quiet, intimate moments of caring for their child in the small hours of the morning. These disrupted nights, rather than being a burden, became some of William's most treasured times with his new family. The first few days required careful attention to George's feeding, sleeping, and general well-being. William found himself becoming expert at reading his son's signals, understanding when he was hungry, tired, or simply needed comfort. The responsibility was enormous, but it felt natural and right in a way that surprised him with its intensity. Catherine's recovery was progressing well, and William was amazed by her resilience and the immediate bond she had formed with their baby. He watched her natural maternal instincts unfold and felt gratitude for the partner he had chosen to share this journey. Their relationship had deepened through the shared experience of preparing for and welcoming their child. The moment finally came to present their son to the world. Standing on the steps of St. Mary's Hospital with Catherine and baby George, William felt a mixture of pride and protectiveness. The crowds cheered and cameras flashed, but his focus remained on his family. The public appearance was brief but meaningful, sharing their joy while maintaining their privacy. Returning to their home at Kensington Palace with their new son felt like the beginning of a grand adventure. William carried the car seat with extra care, hyper-aware of his precious cargo. Every bump in the road, every turn, felt significant as they transported their most valuable passenger to his new home. The nursery they had prepared seemed to come alive with purpose as they settled George into his new environment. William had helped choose every detail, from the soft colors on the walls to the mobile that hung over the crib. Seeing their son in this space they had created with such love and anticipation felt like the fulfillment of months of dreams and planning. That first night at home was both magical and exhausting. William and Catherine took turns checking on the baby, neither quite believing that he was really theirs to keep and love forever. The responsibility was enormous, but so was the joy. Every sound George made was interesting. Every facial expression seemed meaningful. Every peaceful moment was a gift. As William stood by the window of the nursery in the early morning hours, holding his sleeping son and looking out over London, he reflected on how profoundly his life had changed in such a short time. He was still the same person, but he was also completely transformed. He was now a father, with all the love, worry, pride, and responsibility that role entailed. The future stretched ahead, filled with possibilities and adventures he couldn't yet imagine. There would be first words and first steps, bedtime stories and family holidays, challenges to face, and milestones to celebrate. But in this quiet moment, with his son safe in his arms and his wife resting peacefully nearby, William felt complete in a way he had never experienced before. This little person had made him a father, but more than that, he had shown William new depths of love and purpose. Every aspect of his life now had an additional dimension of meaning, because everything he did would be part of the world he was creating for his son. The delightful responsibility of parenthood had begun, and William embraced it with all his heart. The grand cathedral of Westminster Abbey filled with the sound of triumphant music as Prince William, now the Prince of Wales, walked beside his father King Charles III during the coronation ceremony that would define the next era of the British monarchy. At 41 years old, William had witnessed many significant royal occasions, but today held special meaning as he formally acknowledged his father's ascension to the throne while simultaneously accepting his new role as heir apparent and Prince of Wales. The morning had begun before dawn, with careful preparations that combined ancient tradition with modern considerations. William dressed in his ceremonial military uniform, each decoration and insignia carrying historical significance and personal meaning. The weight of the ceremonial sword at his side served as a physical reminder of the responsibilities he was undertaking, not just for today's ceremony, but for the decades of service that lay ahead. Catherine, now the Princess of Wales, looked radiant in her ceremonial robes as she prepared to play her own significant role in the day's events. Their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, had been carefully prepared for their parts in the historic ceremony. William felt a surge of pride watching his family ready themselves for this moment that would be remembered for generations. The significance of the day went beyond the formal ceremony. For William, this represented the culmination of decades of preparation for his future role as king. Since childhood, he had been aware that this day would eventually come, but the reality of seeing his father crowned and accepting his own elevated position in the line of succession felt both momentous and deeply personal. As they made their way to Westminster Abbey, William reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The years since Queen Elizabeth II's death had been a period of transition and adjustment for the entire royal family. His father's accession to the throne had been handled with dignity and respect for both the past and the future, and today's ceremony would mark the formal beginning of the new Carolinian age. The abbey itself was magnificent, decorated with flowers and ceremonial elements that honored both British tradition and the diversity of the modern Commonwealth. Representatives from around the world had gathered to witness this historic occasion, and the atmosphere was one of celebration, reverence, and hope for the future. Taking his place near the altar, William observed the ancient ritual with deep appreciation for its historical significance. The coronation ceremony had remained essentially unchanged for centuries, connecting this moment to 1,000 years of British history. Yet there were also modern touches that reflected contemporary values and the evolving role of the monarchy in the 21st century. When a moment came for the actual crowning, William felt the full weight of witnessing history. As the Archbishop of Canterbury placed St. Edward's crown on his father's head, William understood that he was observing not just a ceremony, but the formal beginning of his father's reign and his own journey toward eventual kingship. The ceremony included moments specifically acknowledging William's new status as Prince of Wales. When he performed the act of homage to his father, kneeling before the newly crowned king and pledging his loyalty and service, William felt the profound connection between personal love for his father and duty to the crown. The words of the ancient oath carried new meaning as he spoke them in this historic setting. One of the most moving aspects of the ceremony was seeing his children participate in this significant family and national moment. Prince George, as second in line to the throne, carried himself with remarkable composure for someone so young. Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, while younger, seemed to understand the importance of the occasion and behaved with impressive dignity throughout the long ceremony. The music throughout the service was spectacular, featuring both traditional pieces that had been performed at coronations for centuries and new compositions created specifically for this occasion. William found himself deeply moved by the combination of familiar hymns and innovative musical arrangements that honored the past while embracing the future. The moment when the congregation sang the national anthem, now with the words changed to honor King Charles III, was particularly emotional. William sang with deep feeling, understanding that he was participating in a moment that marked not just his father's formal recognition as monarch, but the beginning of a new chapter for the nation and the Commonwealth. After the formal crowning, the ceremony continued with the recognition of other members of the royal family and their roles in supporting the new king. William's own recognition as Prince of Wales was met with enthusiastic response from the congregation, reflecting both respect for his years of preparation and optimism about his future leadership. The procession out of Westminster Abbey was magnificent, with the newly crowned King Charles and Queen Camilla leading the way, followed by William, Catherine, and their children. The crowds lining the streets were enormous and enthusiastic, expressing genuine joy and excitement about the new reign. William waved to the crowds while feeling deeply moved by their warm reception. The journey back to Buckingham Palace and the state coaches provided an opportunity to see the massive public celebration that had erupted across London. People had traveled from across the United Kingdom and beyond to witness this historic day, and their enthusiasm was infectious. William felt a renewed sense of connection to the people he would one day serve as king. The balcony appearance at Buckingham Palace was the culmination of the day's public celebrations. Standing with his family before the enormous crowd gathered in front of the palace, William felt the full impact of this moment in British history. The cheers of the crowd, the flyover by the Royal Air Force, and the presence of his entire family created a perfect conclusion to the ceremonial aspects of the day. The private celebrations that evening were more intimate, but equally meaningful. The royal family gathered for a dinner that combined formal toasts with personal reflections on the significance of the day. William spoke about his pride in his father's dedication to duty and his own commitment to preparing for his future role as king. During quieter moments throughout the day, William found himself thinking about his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, and how proud she would have been to see this smooth transition of the monarchy she had served for so many decades. The ceremonies had honored her legacy while marking the beginning of a new era, exactly as she would have wanted. The international dimension of the coronation was also significant for William, as he had the opportunity to meet with leaders from around the Commonwealth and beyond. These conversations reinforced his understanding of the monarchy's continuing relevance in international relations and its role in promoting British values and interests around the world. As the day concluded and William reflected on its significance, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the opportunity to serve his country and the Commonwealth. The ceremonial aspects have been magnificent, but what moved him most was the genuine warmth and enthusiasm of the people who had participated in or witnessed the celebrations. The coronation had marked not just his father's formal recognition as king, but William's own transition into the final phase of his preparation for eventual kingship. Everything he had learned and experienced throughout his life, from his early charitable work with his mother, through his university years, his military service, his marriage, and fatherhood, had been building toward this moment and the responsibilities that lay ahead. Looking toward the future, William felt optimism and determination. The challenges facing the monarchy and the nation were significant, but the success of the coronation and the public response demonstrated that the institution he would one day lead continued to have relevance and support. He was ready to continue his preparation and to serve his people with dedication and integrity. The delightful nature of this moment came not from the pageantry or ceremony, though both were magnificent, but from the deep satisfaction of seeing his father achieve the role he had prepared for his entire life, and from William's own growing readiness to continue the work of service that defined his family's contribution to British society. It was a day that honored the past, celebrated the present, and looked with confidence toward the future.